Hello and welcome to Hopeful Conversations. I'm Vicky Montague, and today I am joined by the incredibly inspiring Joe Martin. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
I am looking forward to this conversation because, well, I was kind of reflecting before we came on together about how long I've known you for, and I was trying to work it out, and I think it
Was it
was
too long? Was it too long?
definitely not too long. Um, I think it's been two and a half years.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And we always talk about how that whole initial connection or get you finding me and me finding you was totally miraculous
Mm.
because I wrote a post on Facebook, and I think it must have been early 2022 or spring 2022 maybe. And you saw it and wrote a comment, and I happened to see your comment, and I wrote a comment back, and then we got into a dialogue, and we took that off onto Messenger. I think we had a few messages, and then we chatted, and the rest is history. But that initial you seeing my post was, well, like I say, kind of like a complete miracle, because you didn't follow me, I didn't follow you. We
Oh,
have friends that are in common, so no reason why you should have seen that, or even how you could have seen that post.
no idea. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's sort of, even that, I think, is a lovely place to start,
yeah.
because there's possibility in that, because we think Facebook runs by an algorithm, which of course we know it does, but that algorithm doesn't necessarily work how we think it works,
Mm,
because we think we're just going to get to see the things that we engage with, or the friends that we engage with, but obviously something else that can happen
mm.
and did happen. And um and yeah, and our and my well, the time that I've spent with you, and kind of seen you grow and blossom in that period of time has just blown my mind, and that's why I wanted to invite you onto this,
Mm.
um,
Okay.
to
Mm.
record a podcast episode with you, because I think what you have to share is super inspiring. And I know you probably have a story that says, no, it's not, I'm not at all, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
um, which is another reason why I wanted to get you on, really. um, just to, kick that one down the road. Um, but yeah, so when we first started chatting, when I first met you, I'm just gonna like say a little bit about how I guess how I kind of have seen your journey, if you like. Um, and then I'm gonna hand it over to you, and I'd love to hear what you have to say
Mm.
about that. But when I met you, my kind of feeling about you was that you were really anxious
Mm.
and stressed and just overwhelmed by life, really, like everything that was going on. You had your own business, you had quite a few employees. You felt like you didn't really know what you were doing, or why, almost why you'd even taken that on. um and I would say you weren't living from joy and freedom and love. You were living from a space of fear and anxiety,
Mm.
and kind of trying to preempt or second guess of what was going to happen next. um and I guess over those 2.5 years, what I've seen is just a kind of opening to something different,
Mm.
um and the creativity that flows out of you now with ease, the just the way that you engage with people and the connections you have, and yeah, there's probably fear still there, yeah, there's probably anxiety and worry, well, that's the same for all of us, right? But
Mm.
there's just a different way of being in the world that I get from you, and so much has changed, right? And I'll leave it to you to kind of maybe tell us a little bit about, what's happened in that time.
Mm.
um so yeah, I'd love to hear from your perspective, like, yeah,
Mm.
what's kind of, what feels different? What happened?
Yeah. There's so much, isn't there? Yeah, I think that it is. It was a miraculous. connection. I don't understand it, but I'm grateful for it, because I had in for some other things had sort of, just use the language counseling or something, or not therapy, but those kind of consultation with third parties in the past on some other things, more than one type of thing, and they were never like this. They were just felt very transactional, kind of. There wasn't a connection, and I mean, I sought them out, and they were very much a process driven kind of situation, whereas I have no idea how, like you've already said, how you just suddenly appeared on my Facebook feed, and I can remember what you wrote. You wrote a post that said about smiles, and that that we have to present to the world a happy, smiley face, even though there might be storms going on behind that. Is that really true? Do we have to do that? And that kind of thing. And I just that really resonated with me, because just like you also said, I was in quite a storm there of circumstance in business and blah, um, and I was really struggling to try try and stick this smile on the front of a storm, because I had to. You can't have staff and have a business and walk in every day and tell everybody how difficult you're finding it. You're there to lead them, and they don't need you to go in. And so I was finding that tough to try and kind of reconcile, because I'm quite. I think I believe in honesty as well, but anyway, and but I think I was in the mindset then, which was that whatever's coming up in the mind must be true. It's coming there because it's there to be listened to and paid attention to. And gosh, it's telling me some pretty difficult stories, and it's telling me there's pretty difficult consequences coming down the road. So get ready. And I was terrified of those impending consequences, which I'm about to face. But and I think one of the early things that we were talking about was just the notion of are these things true? What really is true? What is the significance of the mind's continual communication to you? And we went into Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, which was a groundbreaking book, I think for me, and it started to untether the notion that everything that's happening in here is irrelevant. It is not a true reflection of my reality or your reality, anyone's reality. It is just this noise that's going on, and it doesn't have to. It can be. It's just like a kid's tantrum. It's not necessarily a true reflection. Therefore, it doesn't need the attention and the for all of my years, and probably all of your years, and all of our years, we've given to it. And so to decouple from that, I think was, or to, and I still find it hard now, like 2.5 years on. I still find, in fact, I think I went like you're talking about what's happened. I think I went like that with it, and I think right now I'm not doing very well with it, in all honesty, because I've also gone through a whole load of other changes recently, which I'm not finding easy. But I know the I know the terrain now, whereas back then I didn't know the terrain. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you describe that sort of, was almost, you almost drew, for those of you listening, a wave.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, and that's the experience, isn't it? We get caught up in, we're so habitually um used to listening to everything that we think.
Yeah.
And all of that has come from, as far as I can see, what we've been told, or what we've been conditioned by society or parents or teachers or whatever. But we're so used to listening to that that it doesn't, it's not like it ever goes away. That though,
Mm.
it's like, I mean, I often talked about the radio kind of being born with a radio playing. Like there's this constant chatter that's like
Mm.
just there. And
Mm.
it can be foreground chatter, which for us both, it definitely, has been and can be still.
Yeah.
But but the we can tune out. It's like it can be tuned out.
Mm. Mm.
and it can be not paid 100% attention to. It can just be there as background kind of noise, if you like,
yeah,
static.
yeah,
And I guess, yeah, as humans, we kind of, that attention moves in and
yeah,
out. So
yeah,
sometimes the attention is on that narrative, and then we get the experience of whatever that it's saying.
yeah,
And if that's like, you're a loser and you can't deal with this or whatever, then we get to
mm,
feel that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then, but I think what you said is really key, is like, you didn't know the terrain back then and now you do, and it's like, it's
yeah,
just the knowing that that's all that's happening,
yeah,
and it doesn't mean anything. It's just there's a contraction of attention onto that narrative,
yeah,
and at any time that can expand again.
yeah,
And that's the experience of like, of that
mm,
wave, isn't it, of like,
mm,
yes, sometimes there's a sense of freedom and ease, and
mm,
sometimes there's a sense of not, and actually just knowing that there's nothing wrong in
yeah,
either.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I get a little bit whacked hearing you talk about it, because I think that it feels to me that in what comes to my mind when you say that, or reminds me of part of what I've got out of this process, is that um, I think where you're seated is the thing that is quite has been quite different for me. Is that, previously I was seated in amongst the noise. I was
Mm.
seated in the voices, and I had accepted that this was my identity. That all that was taking place here, in, let's say, inside this room, that is me. And so, in order to feel free, or in order to feel overcome this chaos, I need to change what's happening in this room. That's what needs to happen, and they are generally the noise of my own thoughts. But I've realised, I think, the process that's not the case, because it's where I'm seated that matters. So I can come away from this room. I can go into another room, or I can go and walk to. I don't mean physically. I don't mean go and walk to the beach. I mean, like, I don't know what language to use. Um, yeah, but away from the notion that I'm indelibly connected to what's happening inside this room. That I'm actually, and you said to me first when you talked about the film and being the observer of the film, that you would go and see Saving Private Ryan or something and feel like you were in the Second World War, and you fell in love, and you were sad, and you thought you'd gone through all those experiences and been changed by them, but you were just the observer of all of them. And so being seated back away as the observer, I think, has been the biggest savior of the just falling into the pitfall of, this is me, this is my lot. It's not.
Yeah, and that's a huge, it's a huge thing to see, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because we we think we are everything we think.
yeah, yeah,
So and all those things are things that we haven't chosen to think. It might be, using my example of creativity, I'm not creative. Now, I don't know that anyone said that to me, but obviously there had been something that had happened at some point that my mind had made an association and decided, I'm
mm,
not creative. I'm not a creative person. And so, you know, with that as part of my identity, then of course I wouldn't create.
yeah, yeah,
The exploration of like, well,
yeah,
is that really true? Is it really who I am? Is
yeah,
it really, yeah, is it really the truth? That questioning, which is basically what we did together for
mm,
you, it opens stuff up, right?
mm, mm,
Because if that's not true, then what?
yeah,
And then we're in that space of possibility that I always
yeah,
talk about. It's like, okay, so if it's not true that I'm not creative, then what?
yeah,
Then it appears then paintings happen.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think, just sort of while we're talking about, I think that's one of the things that, as a consequence of our conversations, really kind of opened up for you, because something that I saw when we were working together was this idea that there were things that you couldn't do right now. They
yeah,
were things that were like aspirations for when retirement happened. It's like,
yeah, yeah,
and one of those things was painting.
mm,
And and again, like just kind of poking that idea of, well, why does it have to wait until retirement? It was just something that had been like, I guess because we all get, we all get kind of told stuff societally of like, you have to work really hard while you're working. And then when you retire, then you can do all the lovely things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, well, what if that's not true? What if you can do the lovely things
Mm,
and work?
mm,
What if there can be, what if it's possible to have both?
yeah.
And and you picked up a paintbrush, and I'd love you to talk about that. That
Yeah.
sort of like
Yeah.
explosion that's happened, because it's amazing. And for anyone, I mean, I'll link to, well, I'll link to your Facebook, because that's kind of where you share now your paintings and things, isn't it? But Joe is the most incredible artist.
Mm. I just want to shake my head as soon as you say that. It's so funny, isn't it? That's the automatic reaction now.
No, I'm not.
No.
Yeah. And yet there's evidence to the contrary. And again,
Mm,
that's the mind's story of, I'm not an artist. Like, how can you, I can't, you can't describe me like that, because
mm,
that's the habitually acquired, post-it note we've worn all our lives, if you like.
mm.
And so when someone says something to the opposite, we fight to defend that identity. And it's an identity that we never even chose.
Yeah. 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 So for me, I was when I was a teenager, I used to love to draw. I've always loved to draw, and right from a young age, did all kinds of drawings, birds, and used to draw birds and hi-fi and guitars and shoes and people. And I never liked drawing houses or buildings, which is odd because I'm an architect now. Uh, but um, yeah, so when I was at school, I was always like one of the best at drawing. And then I thought I'll go to art college then because I didn't quite know what to do next. And I really wasn't one of the best. I really wasn't. And it was a real shock to me, actually. It really shocked me. And then I went into architecture because I thought I thought I'd be a fine artist or something. And I thought I'm just not. I can't. I'm not at that level. And I think that was a bit of a blow, really. Now when I look back, and so I think I put all those things away then. That's it now. This is obviously something I'm not as good at as I'd been led to believe I was as good at.
Mhm.
And so this is just going to be something I'd sort of dally with, like you say, in retirement. And I'd quite like to do it. And I'd never painted on canvas or anything like that either. And I think that was a fear for me to paint on canvas because that felt like that's what proper artists do. So I'd never put paint on a brush and put that brush onto a piece of canvas. And so, and I was very inspired by what you said when you said, you're a scientist and you're not an artist. And then, like painting like the two behind you, they're your paintings, aren't they? For everybody watching. And I was really inspired by that, and I thought it was really cool and I liked the courage as well in it to say, no, is that really true? I think it takes a lot of courage to say, is that really true? Because there's a lot of comfort in saying this must be true. This is the room I'm used to living in, and I know how to navigate this room. So I think it takes a lot of courage to walk through the door and go somewhere else. Um, and so you and Lucy were running a art workshop in January 23, I think, the end of
Yeah.
January. And I thought, well, let's go and see what happens. And I went, and I just felt like I just fanned around in this. I felt like I didn't want to be in the room because I didn't want to be in front of people. I didn't want to be, and I was presented with a canvas that scared me because that's what proper artists do, and I'd never done it. And and Lucy was sort of saying about this and that, and this isn't anything about Lucy, but I couldn't really connect with doing that because it felt too mechanical to me. Not anything against what she was saying, but it just wasn't what I was wanting to do. But I was in front of everyone, so I had to do something. So I just did something, and I spent more time washing my brushes than I did painting because I just kept going in the kitchen and washing my brushes, and just because every time you were presented with what are you going to do, I didn't know what to do, but I really enjoyed it. And I felt there was a lid came off on that day, and I felt safe because I knew you by then, and I felt safe with you. Lucy's lovely. I felt safe with Lucy. I'd only met her then, and the other people in the group, there was like 8 of us, was there something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was lovely, and so I felt safe, and that's important to me. Um, and so I didn't think anything had happened that was sort of I don't know what language to use, spiritual and I didn't know anything about unlocked, but it really did
Yeah.
because from then on I just could not stop creating. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't just stuff just started to come through. It's like it was this nag always to do something, and not in a horrible way, but in a playful, bit like when your dog wants to go for a walk. That kind of, it's a lovely thing, isn't it? Well, it is usually, but do you know what I mean? There was a kindness. I think it was all in the frame of kindness and joy, not in a you ought to, none of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was just, and I felt really embarrassed. I still do feel embarrassed if I share stuff. I'm actually embarrassed to do it still because I feel like it still points to me, and it's still said, and it's trying to say you're special, which I really don't like. So often I'm fighting that when I share. So it's not easy to share even now, I find. But I do love the idea that life comes through this being into the world, and if you keep the door shut, the world is not so well lit. That kind of thing. So that's why that encourages me to shine a light into the world.
Yeah, and I love that because I think when we first met, you were absolutely like not sharing any of this because you had, you've always been a musician,
Yeah,
um, and a singer-songwriter, and then
not
this.
really, not really a singer songwriter. I tried it. It's something I worked at. I'm the kind of person who must, because I know about music. Sorry, the phone. I must be the somebody who produces songs. So they were worked up songs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now that's completely different, right? I
Totally
mean,
different.
and I think, just going to the sharing thing, there was, I mean, obviously you're describing there still being kind of a sort of fear or a reticence to share, and like I guess many creatives have that, what will people think kind of thinking.
Yeah,
I love that through our conversations you could see that it wasn't personal. It's like these things that we are just able to do. It seems to me like we all have some kind of talents and gifts,
yeah, yeah,
and they're kind of totally unique to
yeah,
our physical form, if you like.
yeah,
And so often we think they're about us, and if you can just see that there's an ease in them, they just happen through us, and that it's like you say, like a, I don't know, we're just like the conduit for
yeah,
life to express itself in that
yeah,
way.
yeah,
Then that personal element, it doesn't feel so tight. And yes, there can still be the narrative that's like, "Oh, what are you doing, you'll show off, or you shouldn't be
yeah,
showing this, whatever." but
yeah, yeah,
but there's kind of it's looser, I suppose, and there's more of a seeing that, as you say, to share it is to just allow what wants to be created in the world out.
yeah.
And in doing that, you inspire other people. Like you show other people that that's a possibility too.
Mm.
um but yeah, going back to the writing, I mean, now like poems literally tumble out of you, right?
Yeah. I've never written poems before in my life. Not at school, nothing. That's different to art and music. They never featured in my life. I didn't particularly I have read them, but I didn't. It's not something I do. I don't read poetry. I'm not this sort of Renaissance man swinging in some kind of hammock, reading reading poetry in the sunshine. But yeah, they have just come through because they've just been a feature of life.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm really curious, and I think my listeners would be really curious to know what you make of that. Like how, so you said that you used to write, but it was kind of a forced, I should be doing this, I need to do this, or whatever. And I know from how you describe it now that that's not the case. And I'd just love to know, like, what's changed? How is that? Like, what's different?
I don't know the answers to these things, by the way. I don't. I'm the experiencer of these things as well. So I'm the observer of these miracles. As so, I'm not a lot ahead, further ahead than you. I was, in all honesty, I would say. But I get the first-hand experience of joy of receiving them and recording them, and I think that's what drives me to remain as open as possible, because I get a real kick from doing it. It's not I don't get it. I do get, I mean, I love to hear people like the songs, or they like the poetry, or they like the paintings. Obviously I do. And maybe all that's ego, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe I'm just still stuck in the child there, or whatever that is. I don't know enough about it. But there is something before all of that, which is me privately in the moments of just being amazed, having receiving a song and singing it, like we've done in the creative space, to receive a song with all the words and the chords and the melody, and to have had a light touch on it is so thrilling. It really, really is thrilling. And then after that, there's the sharing it with other people stuff. So, and it's the same with the poetry. I found with the poetry that it feels like a mark of authenticity is if I'm really moved by the poem, which I generally am. And maybe this is just me being judgmental, actually thinking about it, but I've kind of got to the point where I'm like, if my brain's involved in it, I don't get moved by it. But because if my intellect has kind of crafted this thing, I'm not really moved by it. But when my intellect isn't involved and it's come through as life, I get so moved by what has just come through and ended up as a set of words on a page. And when I go back, it feels like it's the mark of authenticity. It's not, and that's just language. And I can read them, and I can weep when I've read them. And again, I'll weep more than once as I go back and read them. And for me, that feels, for some reason, I don't know what it means, but that makes them feel authentic then, because they're not being worked out. It's the same with songs. If the song is still moving me, then it feels such a different experience to the crafting of something where I'm now going to write a song about the sunrise, and it's going to feel like this, and it's going to sound like this, and I'm going to use these instruments. That's a totally different thing. The bell ringing, and you just sit and wait for it.
Yeah. I love how you describe that, like the bell ringing and then things arriving. And I can only liken it, I suppose, to when I'm working with people, when I'm coaching people, when I'm having these kinds of conversations. It's like I've always imagined that the mind, intellect, whatever, is kind of outside the door, and I don't know what's going to get shared. I don't know what's going to get said, and there's just an opening and allowing of speech to happen without it being crafted by that inner narrative. And when you were describing songs just coming through without the intellect being involved, it feels like the similar kind of thing where you're just, and I think you said about being open. It's kind of almost setting aside that part of us that just never shuts up.
Yeah.
And it comes in, like it will come in when I'm having conversations, but it's then sort of, for me, I have the experience of just like, okay, yeah, that's nice, but not now.
Yeah.
So when I'm speaking, when I'm sharing, when I'm, doing webinars or talks or whatever, it's like it's the first time I've heard it. It's a bit like poetry, a poem arrives, and you read it, and I guess it's the same with painting. It's sort of that, my God, that, like, wow, like I don't feel involved in it necessarily, other than this, the physicality of it, the involvement, but not the mental side of it.
And it feels to me that that I think I've grown up thinking that, and being led to believe that creativity is something that you generate. I'm going to now paint, or I'm going to write a song, or I'm going to write a poem, or something like that, and therefore there's an effort. There's this generation of I just don't. That's not my experience. My experience is that there's a life force, and it's a kind and loving life force that it you can be open to, and it comes through like a river. And so you just get to, you can just take your feet off the bottom and you can just flow in this river.
Mm.
And that river will take any course it wants to take. And sometimes, and the great thing about that is you don't have to be in a good mood for it. You know, you don't have to be positioned for it in that sense. Um, you can have a bad day and still get a good poem. You know, because it is, and it's a kind. It's a. I think for me that what's the the feature of it which makes it stand out is it's just loving and it's just kind and it's just joyful and it's just real. It's that feels like these are the features of the life force. It's just the kindness that comes through and does what it wants to do.
Yeah, and I think it's really what you said there, something about the river like taking any shape or it having its own course. It's like, some people might be listening and thinking, well, okay, so I'm gonna just like I'm gonna open and then I'm gonna get a poem, or I'm gonna, it's like it's kind of not that, is it?
No,
It's specific to each individual. We all have something, and
yeah,
some and we're often not allowing that something. And it might be, I don't know, running. It might be being an athlete. It might be like for me, it was creating recipes for however
mm,
many years.
yeah,
It can be in any kind of form, but it's that sense of ease, isn't it? Where there's not a feeling of trying or effort or
yeah,
making things happen. And often we dismiss it because it seems so easy.
yeah.
It's like,
We do that.
oh, everyone can do this.
Yeah,
It's easy. So
yeah,
we overlook it. And I think it's so important to just like what comes easily to you?
yeah,
What is like when you're just minding your own business, if you like, what do you find yourself just doing effortlessly?
yeah,
Because that's the thing.
mm,
That's your thing. And it
yeah,
isn't what everyone else can do. And when you realize that and you allow that and you share that,
mm,
I think amazing things happen.
I agree. I think it's also that there's this. We've been taught that there must be an outcome, which is something which I don't know that I can sell or something like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think people do that, and in some ways, I'm envious of it. I'd love to do that. You know, we'd all like to sell our paintings or sell our music or whatever, or would we? I don't know. I haven't thought about that until this moment. Maybe we don't anyway. But I think all the time you're fixated on making this brand and making this thing that has got to be monetized somehow. I think it's just a slightly unhelpful distraction away from the fact
Mm.
that this is a life force. It just is. If you want it to come through, it's not even if you want it to come through, it wants to come through. And if you want to partner with it, then it will. But it's not doing it to pay your mortgage off. Such a shame.
Yeah, and it can. And I guess there's,
Yeah.
even the subtle little um, conditioning in there of like, oh well, I can't make money out of the thing I love, or, I can't possibly sell my paintings because it's too easy for, they're just it's like it's not hard enough, or
Yeah.
often there's a load of conditioning in there that means that we're kind of not allowing that to happen. And obviously, it has happened for both of us
Mm.
where we've painted and had nothing on it and kind of offered it out to whoever, and they've been bought. And I know that you've gone through a long period before you moved, which is another story,
Mm.
um, where you were doing loads of commissions of animal paintings,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
which just kind of took a life of their own because once one person had had one, they told the next person and they wanted one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. Absolutely. I haven't done those for a while, but yeah. Yeah. It's lovely. Yeah. And then the other side of it is like, as you know, I've recorded some songs now, and they're
Mm.
now out into the world. Three or four are out in the world, and I am interested to see what happens with those. It would be great if they were successful somehow. But what's also interesting though is that I think the evidence of the life force in the song is what's touching the hearts of the listeners. And people, I've had lots of messages about one particular one which you know about. Just hold on, and it has been a real healing for a lot of people, just like it was for me when it came through. That came through as a healing to me, and then it's gone forward to be a healing for other people.
Yeah, and I mean, that song was something that happened. Well, it was relatively early on in our coaching time,
Yeah,
wasn't it? Just like a rose arrived. I don't know what the word
Yeah,
is.
I don't know.
But yeah, a beautiful, beautiful song. And yeah, for someone who's not a singer-songwriter, hmm,
And the
wow.
funny thing about that one, so that's just got one verse and one chorus in it. That's all it is. So that's all that would come through. And my musical brain says, okay, what's the introduction? What's the turn? What's the second verse going to be? What's the bridge going to be? And so I was asking, and this is going to sound weird because, but it's only because I can't think of another set of words to use to ask to say this is I was asking the life force. That's not what I did, but that's just the
Yeah, yeah.
characterization of it. I was just waiting to see if verse two would come and verse and a bridge, and I could use all those bits and make them push them together and make them into a song. And I just get the answer was always like folded arms. That's it. You've got it.
Nothing else.
There's
Yeah.
nothing more. That's it. We're done here. And sure enough, that's all it ever needed.
And I love that because it's only our mind, our intellect, our conditioning, our learning, our knowledge
Mm,
that says, well, that isn't complete. There needs to be more.
mm.
That's kind of really what gets in the way of everything, is in every aspect of life.
Yeah,
Well, this isn't how it's meant to be.
yeah. That's
And the
it.
question is, well, what if it is? That is exactly how it's meant to be.
Yeah,
And it's perfect, right as it is, without the thoughts that it's not, then it's
yeah,
perfect, isn't it?
yeah. Absolutely. And it's made it a little bit of a problem in some ways because I've got some really great friends musical friends, and some of them have said to me, and I've got no problem with this, but it creates a problem for me in that they'll say they'll offer suggestions musically about what about this, and what you might do is normally that, and I'm going inside going, I really do that, and I know you're really good, and I know you know what you're doing, and but the song won't let me, but I can't communicate that. It's just because it just sounds weird.
Yeah, but it's yeah, and that's funny, isn't it? Because that's just like people acquiring information, acquiring knowledge, and
Yeah,
then that being the truth, and that being how things have to be.
yeah,
And what I love doing with people is just to shake that up and like, is that actually how it has to be?
100%. Yeah, yeah. It's okay as it is, or whatever. Is that really true? What do you think in terms of like a boxed up version of a popular song? Is that really the full extent of what's available?
Mm. Mm. Oh, I could talk to you forever, but I'm conscious of the
Yeah.
time, and I would love you to share with people where they can find those beautiful songs for a start. Um, and then I will put the link to is your Facebook page the best place to put a link to find your poetry? And you don't really share much poetry on there, do you? You hide that bit more.
No, I've got this. So this is really so. If you could share my Spotify account, then
Yeah.
that's going to have the three songs of the four EP. That'll have that.
And
But
what's the name of the Spotify account, just for those that are
I'll
wanting
just
to
look up
hear
the
it
name of the
rather
Spotify account. Um, I think it's just Joe Martin.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are other people called Joe Martin. That's outrageous, but yeah, Joe Martin. There's three songs on there: "Love Is a Winding Path," "Breathe," and "Just Hold On." For some reason, I've been attributed with another song called "Guru" by David Short that's now part of my EP. Apparently, I don't know who he is, but that's not mine. So yeah, you can look that up on Spotify, and it's also on I pay another company to deal with the distribution, so I'm new to all of this. That I've got this Instagram account called Joe Martin Art and or Music and Poetry, but I've lost the credentials for how to post on it, so it's got nothing on it. So I've got to sort that out. So yeah, my normal Instagram and my normal Joe Martin Facebook, you'll see there's some poetry on there and stuff like that. But I probably need to get out of there. I'd like to make a book of the poetry or some of the poetry,
Yeah.
but that's in the plan.
So Joe Martin is your Instagram, just plain just Joe Martin. I
Yeah,
mean, I'll link it obviously
I
in
can
the
send
notes.
you the links, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and is there anything that people listening to this can do for you to help with like spreading the word about your music, your
Yeah. I mean, I would really appreciate. I think that I feel this, and I just went and played for a weekend in Exeter, And I had a lot of people came up to me about this song, Just Hold On, and they said they thought that, that the song was significant for this moment. And so I think to spread the word on that song would be great. I've contacted the BBC about getting them to play it and things like that. I don't know anything about these things. I'm just somebody I play these songs here in this room, and I've just started doing it at an open mic where I live, which I've never done in my life. Never done open mics or anything like that. So I feel like I'm new to all of it. So I think spreading the word on any of these three songs, but Just Hold On feels like it's got something on it.
Yeah, lovely. And if anyone wants an art commission,
Yeah,
Joe's artwork is outstandingly beautiful.
of
And if
course.
you scroll through his Instagram or on Facebook, then you'll find examples of how amazing it is. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for sharing a little snippet of your story, because there's a lot more to it. But yeah, time-wise, maybe we'll get you back on another one.
Cool. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, really lovely to see you. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks,
See you
Vicky.
soon. Bye.
Bye all.